All right, guys, so absolutely dystopian stuff here as the Trump administration just arrested, disappeared, and is threatening to deport one of the lead Palestine protesters at Columbia University as they've been fighting for divestment amidst Israel's genocide in Gaza. So if the fascism alarm bells haven't been set off for you yet, this is probably going to do it. They start out here from Dropsite News saying that on Saturday night, Department of Homeland Security, or DHS agents, entered a student residential building at Columbia University in Uptown New York and detained Mahmoud Khalil, one of the lead negotiators on behalf of pro-Palestine protesters at 2024's Gaza Solidarity Encampment. In a sweeping attack on the First Amendment, the Trump administration said this week that it would begin revoking visas of, quote, Hamas sympathizers, specifically citing Columbia University students. The detention followed a 2-day targeted online campaign against Khalil by pro-Israel groups and individuals, including Columbia's high-profile pro-Israel professor, Shai Davidai. Now, if you guys have been following my channel for some months now, you'll remember at the height of our Gaza Solidarity Encampment coverage, the kinds of shit that this guy was getting up to, just outright harassing his own students. Absolutely unhinged individual there. And he was a part of apparently this online campaign against Khalil. But they continue saying that he's an Algerian citizen of Palestinian origin and an American green card holder who was detained by DHS officials around 8:30 as he was entering the Columbia residential building where he lives, and they say he was returning from an iftar, the breaking of the day-long fast observed by many Muslims during the month of Ramadan. Now, important that he's a green card holder because apparently these agents showed up, thought that he was here on a visa, and they said, your visa has been revoked, again, for some amorphous allegation of being a Hamas sympathizer, which basically means nothing. It means somebody who is critical of Israel in the eyes of the Trump administration. But they show up, they say, your visa has been revoked. He says, no, I'm on a green card, right? Which is an entirely higher standard even for potentially removing somebody's status here. He is a lawful permanent resident here in the United States. And then after he says that, they turn around and they say, okay, your green card is now being revoked again. What? Now, they continue. They say Khalil's wife, who is 8 months pregnant, was with him at the time. A statement by the pro-Palestine group Writers Against the War on Gaza stated that he was, quote, abducted and detained without the physical demonstration of a warrant or officially filed charges. So they essentially showed up at this residential building that I think is on campus. They show up, they detain him without a warrant, without any charges, and say, we're revoking your visa, wait, we're revoking your green card, and then they take him off. Now they continue. It gets worse from here. They say Khalil was detained at a DHS facility in New Jersey, according to a database for U.S. Immigrations and Customs Enforcement, or ICE. But when his wife went to try and visit him, she was informed that he was not there, saying he is not at the ICE facility in New Jersey. I can confirm that he is not there. Khalil's attorney, Amy Greer, told Dropsite, at this time, we have an idea where he is, but we cannot confirm that 100%. So again, they just disappeared the guy to the point where his 8 months pregnant wife didn't even know where he was. Again, no charges, no warrant presented. They say, according to the WAWOG, the DHS agents told Khalil that the U.S. Department of State had revoked his student visa. The group said that this was despite the fact that he has a green card, not a visa, and is a lawful permanent resident. On Sunday evening, DHS spokesperson Tricia McLaughlin sent a follow-up statement confirming ICE arrested Khalil for activities aligned with Hamas. What does that mean? What does activities aligned with Hamas mean? Did he join Hamas and he went over to Gaza and joined the Qassam brigades or something like that? What are you actually talking about? Was it a chant at a rally? Was he passing out leaflets with information on the genocide in Gaza? What exactly does activities aligned with Hamas mean? And they still refuse to even explain what that actually means, right? Again, not charged with any crime. They're not saying he committed any illegal activities here. They're just saying he was doing activities aligned with Hamas, whatever that means. They say on March 9th, 2025, in support of President Trump's executive orders prohibiting anti-Semitism and in coordination with the Department of State, U.S. Immigrations and Customs Enforcement arrested Mahmoud Khalil, a former Columbia University graduate student. Khalil led activities aligned to Hamas, a designated terrorist organization. ICE and the Department of State are committed to enforcing President Trump's executive orders and to protecting U.S. national security. Now, in a second, I'm going to get to Trump's follow-up statement on all of this because he somehow made it even worse. Now, a little bit more background on this. They say that Saturday's actions against Khalil also took place against the backdrop of the Trump administration's decision to cancel around $400 million in federal grants and contracts to Columbia University. The White House has claimed that Columbia's, quote, failure to protect Jewish students from anti-Semitic harassment was the reason for this move. So keep in mind, guys, this is the same Columbia University that has had students suspended, expelled, arrested by the NYPD at some of these encampments and sit-ins. It's not as if Columbia has acted in any way, shape, or form like sympathetic to these student protesters. They have been extremely aggressive towards them. Now, we also had a follow-up statement here from Marco Rubio, who once again said, we will be revoking the visas and or green cards of Hamas supporters in America so that they can be deported. Now, again, Hamas supporter in this context means anything that the Trump administration deems it to be, right? There is no official, like, oh, I endorsed Hamas openly, right? Or I called for October 7th to happen or anything like that, even though that would still fall under the bounds of the First Amendment and protections that you're supposed to get for that. But we're not even talking about that, right? In many of these instances, they call even just the act of protesting Israel or criticizing Israel, you being on the side of Hamas, right? It's essentially like, back in before the U.S. invasion of Iraq, if you were to come out and say, hey, I don't think this invasion is such a good idea, people at the time would say things like, oh, so you're pro-Saddam, right? You support Saddam Hussein. I mean, it's the same exact shit. Now, of course, the ADL, so-called Anti-Defamation League, that's really the, Apartheid Defense League, as many people call it, they chimed in here in support of arresting him, saying, we firmly believe there should be swift and severe consequences for those who provide material support to foreign terrorist organizations, incite violence in support of terrorist activities, or conceal their identities in order to harass and intimidate Jewish individuals and institutions with impunity. So again, citation needed. Citation needed. What exactly do you mean by material support to foreign terrorist organizations? Was he sending weapons to Hamas? What are you talking about? I mean, this is just made up bullshit. Now, again, here we get to the Trump administration, or directly from Trump on Truth Social, who took it to an entirely different level. So in case there was any mistake about what this is actually about and whether or not this is outright fascism that we're witnessing in real time here, he says this: following my previously signed executive orders, ICE proudly apprehended and detained Mahmoud Khalil, a radical foreign pro-Hamas student on campus at Columbia University. This is the first arrest of many to come, saying there's going to be a lot more of these. We know there are more students at Columbia and other universities across the country who have engaged, and this is the key part here, in pro-terrorist, anti-Semitic, anti-American activity, and the Trump administration will not tolerate it. Guys, he's outright saying it here. Okay, let's not pretend as if the Trump administration so desperately cares about the issue of anti-Semitism. I would think, first and foremost, if you were going to address that, you would address the neo-Nazis within your own party as a good starting point, right? That's obviously not what they're talking about. Okay, they're talking about this in relation to Israel, because Israel's image, as they have committed a obvious genocide for the entire world to see, and there's been a large degree of pushback, especially from young people, especially from students on some of these campuses. They don't like that, right? They don't like that Israel's image is allowed to be critiqued in the public spaces, right? They do not like that. So they're doing a crackdown in the most aggressive and egregious way possible. Now, again, the key part here, that he says any students essentially who are engaged in pro-terrorist, anti-Semitic, or anti-American. So now it's not even just this, nonsense amorphous allegation of being pro-terrorism or anti-Semitic, but it's also anti-American activity. So now he's saying, if you go out and do anything that I personally, your King Donald Trump, decide is anti-American, then you can also be arrested, detained, disappeared, and deported. Anti-American activities. I mean, guys, this is a settled constitutional issue in this country. Even conservative Supreme Court justices have sided with things like flag burning. Right? You can burn the American flag in a public space. That is not a crime. That's not illegal. That falls under the First Amendment. There is no such thing as illegal anti-American activity, right? This is just like full-blown hysteria that we're witnessing right now. And they're using this as an opportunity to basically just target their political opponents. In this case, critics of Israel and possibly even critics of the Trump administration. Now, this is also coming on the backdrop of the State Department now apparently using artificial intelligence to revoke visas of foreign students who appear pro-Hamas. So now they're stepping this up. I mean, it doesn't get more dystopian than this. They're using AI to search through broad swaths of young people's social media history to see, oh, after October 7th, did you post anything in solidarity with Gaza? Did you post anything critical of Israel? Did you say that they're genocidal? Did you say that they're an apartheid state? Did you criticize them in any way? And then they're going to label that under the pro-Hamas banner. Again, guys, all we're talking about here is speech. That's what we're talking about. We're not talking about illegal activities. It would be one thing if you're on a student visa, or even if you're a green card holder here in the US and you commit some violent crime, right? That's one thing. And that would almost be much more understandable in terms of that person maybe getting deported. But that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about people expressing views that the Trump administration is subjectively defining as being aligned with terrorism or aligned with Hamas. It's absolutely unreal. Now, we also want to take here from Brian Grimm. He says to deport a lawful permanent resident over a speech issue without due process or a criminal conviction is un-American. True. Maybe this is the new America, but let's be honest that we are gutting the First Amendment, the cornerstone of what makes us a free country. And I think he's entirely correct there. Guys, this puts the nail in the coffin. Donald Trump is the most aggressively anti-free speech president in modern American history. And I don't even think it's close. It's really not even close. And if you think that he is, if you're somebody who believed on the campaign trail maybe that he is going to be a warrior for free speech rights, you would be sorely mistaken. Guys, he is arresting, detaining, disappearing people and having them deported for speech that he disagrees with, for speech that he doesn't like, and even worse, for speech that's critical of a foreign fucking country. That is as anti-free speech as it possibly gets, guys. Now, moving on to some other Israel updates, in terms of, some things that may be worthy of protest and speaking out against, here we have from Amnesty International. Israel's decision to cut off electricity supply to Gaza desalination plant, cruel and unlawful. Their quote here, they say, the decision to cut off electricity to Gaza's main operational desalination plant a week after it halted the entry of all humanitarian aid and commercial supplies, including fuel and food, violates international law and is further evidence of Israel's genocide against Palestinians in the Gaza Strip. So, as Mehdi Hassan points out here, and this is the latest update, guys, is you remember in my last video covering Israel, they decided to completely cut off all of the humanitarian aid from getting into Gaza, a collective punishment campaign against the civilians there to try to pressure Hamas to adopt this brand new ceasefire deal that they're pushing after they violated the initial agreed upon ceasefire deal dozens and dozens of times. So this is what we call a war crime, right? To collectively punish 2 million people, okay, as a leverage point, as a tactic for negotiating. Now, they added on top of that, as Amnesty was just pointing out there, they're now also cutting off the electricity to desalination plants, guys. Now, as Mehdi Hassan points out here, he says, number one, this is the kind of move that the International Court of Justice, the ICJ, specifically warned against in its ongoing genocide case. This is one of the main things that the ICJ was pointing out to Israel as South Africa was bringing this genocide case, is that you guys are engaging in collective punishment of the entire civilian population. You can't be cutting off the food, the fuel, the water, the electricity. Right? And that's stuff that we heard very early on after October 7th, is that they were going to cut off all of those things, specifically as a punishment for the entire population there. As they were also saying at the same time, there's no such thing as innocent civilians, right? He says, number two, it's a reminder that Gaza is indeed occupied, despite Hezbollah claims to the contrary, as Israel wouldn't be able to exert such control at the flick of a switch over a non-occupied place. Another important point to be making here. Right? Because for some reason, I don't even know how anybody acting in good faith or remotely in good faith could try to make the argument that pre-October 7th, Gaza was not effectively occupied by Israel, but some people were trying to make that case, right? And this is another reminder, as Mehdi Hassan is pointing out there, it's not normal for, two separate entities like this, for one to be able to have the ability to overnight flip off all of the electricity or the water or the food or the fuel or the medical supplies from a different territory. That's not normal unless you're under occupation. So I think that makes this pretty explicitly clear now. It's even so clear that We have Piers Morgan, guys. Piers Morgan, of all people. You've watched my coverage of Piers Morgan's debates on this very subject. So this is the last guy you would expect to, go against Israel. But he says, so it seems, in response to Dave Rubin here, so help me out. Why should Israel have the right to turn Gaza's power on and off? And this was after he responded with this initial thing saying, this is wrong, and it's wrong that Israel even retains the power over Gaza to do this. So rare statement here on this channel. Won't hear it many times, but credit to Piers Morgan. He's right about this, okay, in this specific instance. And of course, the only person that could make Piers Morgan right is Dave Rubin deciding to chime in here. Now, we finish off here with one final reminder from Abu Bakr Abed, who says, just so you know, even before the war, in Gaza, we had 8 hours only of electricity. On multiple occasions, the electricity supply was cut off deliberately by Israel. Gaza has always been bleeding. So I'll leave you guys off with that. So we have a continuation of the genocidal tactics inside of Gaza, a continuation of the settler colonialism in the West Bank. And here domestically, we have the Trump administration going full-blown fascism and police state in order to try to silence any criticism of the government that we are fully arming, funding, giving diplomatic cover to as they commit these heinous crimes.
Politic guy has the best politics. Believe me, no one does it like him. Believe me, everyone is saying